Hi everybody, Lucas here. Pokémon have just announced another Pokémon Presents that'll be roughly 20 minutes long on the 27th of February 2023. So I just figured, let's talk about what might be in that Pokémon Presents. First of all, I do think that we're going to get a bit of news on Pokémon Scarlet and Violet DLC, but I'd like to get some of the more predictable things out of the way first, like for example, the mobile games. If you look at the last Pokémon Presents from last year, it did spend about half of the Pokémon Presents talking about the mobile games, with that being like Pokémon Unite, Pokémon Go, they announced Cafe Remix, Pokémon Masters EX, Pokémon Masters X, let's go. And maybe they might eventually talk about Pokémon Sleep at some point too. That still exists, right? So although I do think that there's going to be a significant portion of the presents dedicated to at least some of these games, maybe not all of them, I think Unite and Go are pretty much guaranteed. I do think with Pokemon actually having a new mainline game to talk about, with, as I say, a probable expansion pass, I think it'll be less significant than it was last time, maybe not half of the entire presentation. Maybe some new character announcements for Unite, possible new generation of Pokemon for Pokemon Go maybe. Just pretty basic stuff altogether, I'd imagine. One thing that I'm not sure they're going to touch upon, but would be a great time to talk about, is of course the new anime with the new protagonist. I know Ash had a series of a few episodes where it was basically a victory lap, and I believe they haven't fully finished airing in the West, but they have in Japan. I'm not really the anime person, so I'm not sure, but it does seem like the perfect time to give us an introduction to whoever the new character for the anime is. I mean, we spent, 20 years with Ash Ketchum? Yeah, I think you probably want to make a big point about who the first new protagonist of the series is going to be. I'm not really the anime person, but I think they'd be remiss to not talk about it to some extent. The next thing is something that I think is a bit of a glaring omission from the Nintendo Direct that happened not long ago, and that is, of course, the Game Boy games. They have briefly shown that the Pokemon trading card game is going to be available. We don't have a solid release date for that, and I don't know if they're going to include the trading card game 2 in the Japanese side of the online service. But oddly enough, we never got a mention of any other Pokemon game either for the Game Boy or the Game Boy Advance. And that seems a little bit weird, considering the Game Boy basically had a second life because of Pokemon Red and Green and Blue. So yes, I do think we're going to get some Game Boy games, potentially some Game Boy Advance games. I think they'd be smart to probably do a mixture of both. But this is Nintendo we're talking about, and they have a very slow drip feed when it comes to the Nintendo Online service in general. I'm imagining that maybe they do a little shadow drop of Gen 1 for the Game Boy, potentially Ruby and Sapphire as well, but again, I think they want to hang back on those. Ideally, we would get at least, Gen 1 for the Game Boy and Gen 3 for the Game Boy Advance. Not sure what they're going to do with Yellow and Emerald. It feels very Nintendo to give us those 6 months down the line. Again, they're just very protective with these things. Gold, Silver, Crystal are probably a little far away. And then I imagine they create kind of a second drop with Gold, Silver, Crystal and Fire Red and Leaf Green further down the line. And then of course, between the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, there's a few spin-off games like Pinball, Mystery Dungeon, Puzzle Challenge. So yeah, I imagine maybe they might drop them at some point, but with the trading card game being a spin-off that was already announced, I imagine the only ones they're going to talk about are the mainline games or Fire Red and Leaf Green. And then there is also Pokemon Stadium. I imagine maybe they announced that there's some sort of compatibility with Pokemon Stadium, and that the first game is coming next month to coincide with the fact that you can play Gen 1 on the Game Boy emulator now. Pokemon Stadium did have a Nintendo Switch Online disclaimer that said content can't be shared across games, meaning, the transfer pack functionality would not be available. However, with the announcement of the Game Boy emulator on NSO, that has now been removed completely from the website. I don't know about whether they could get the Game Boy Tower working so that we could play the games at double or triple speed if you unlock them, but I'd imagine the bare minimum is that we can use Pokemon either from Pokemon Home or the Game Boy save files and use them in our battle. Again, I imagine it's probably the Nintendo thing to do of release Pokemon Stadium 2 later around the same time that they release Gen 2 on the Game Boy emulator. It makes sense to release the Game Boy games and Pokemon Stadium related game around the same time, and as I say, Nintendo just like to spread these games out. So people have also noticed that the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon devs are stated to be in the Presents at some point. I don't know if that'll be in the form of a Mystery Dungeon remake, a brand new Mystery Dungeon if the remake sold really well, or maybe they could just make a brand new spin-off that we're not expecting. Either way, there's a lot of fans of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, so the idea that those devs are working on something Pokemon related is always cool. A game that we do know is in development, but we haven't heard about since a few years back, is also Detective Pikachu 2. After the release of Detective Pikachu the movie, we did have a brief mention that it was in the works, but they've kind of just been radio silent since then, so I'm not really sure whether the game's actively still in development and happening or not, but maybe we would get a little shout out about that. And there was also recently talks that they're trying to get the second movie made, but there's a lot of troubles with doing so. So I'd expect to not hear about a movie sequel at very least. I do think there'll be somewhere in this Pokemon Presents that talks about Pokemon Home, its compatibility with Scarlet and Violet being updated soon. I think we just get a few more details about that, and maybe how Pokemon Home might function with any of the Game Boy games, the Pokemon Stadium games, things like that. Nothing too major for Pokemon Home. Maybe a new gimmick Pokemon, like the starters with the hidden abilities or something to make people subscribe to Pokemon Home. They often do that kind of thing. And then we move on to what I mentioned earlier, and what I presume will be the biggest chunk of the Pokemon Presents, and that's going to be DLC or the expansion pass for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I can kind of see them doing something similar to what they did with Sword and Shield, where we get maybe a couple of bigger updates with new areas to explore and stuff, but it already seems pretty obvious that Game Freak were already stretched for time when it comes to Scarlet and Violet development. So when people are saying that there's hints at maybe going back to Kalos, I imagine that if that is the case, we're not going to get anywhere close to a full region to explore. I'm honestly very doubtful of Kalos being the extra area in the game. I think it makes perfect sense because of the location of like Spain to France and where on the map the chunk of land that's grayed out is, but I do think that Game Freak know that if we went to Kalos, we'd want to revisit Kalos completely, and I think they'd kind of be just digging their own grave by only giving us a slight portion of Kalos. A couple of things Kalos related though that I think are more likely to happen. First off, maybe there's a potential that we get some story content related to the character of AZ or Az. I'm not really sure which one it is, it's two capital letters, but it doesn't really matter either way. I think that would be one of the more interesting things to explore from the Kalos. It was kind of left a little bit open-ended and kind of teased at more to come with Az, and we never got that from X and Y. There is a lot of theories that Area Zero is related to either AZ or the ultimate weapon formed in Pokemon X and Y, so there is some tangential links there. Not sure how relevant they actually are and whether any of those theories work out to be true, but it would kind of be cool if they were. AZ did have a unique design for Floette that, as far as I'm aware, there's never been any event for in any game, so it's never been obtainable. So I think it would be really cool to have like this little story moment with AZ, and we get that Floette as some kind of reward for the story. That'd be really awesome, even if it couldn't evolve into a unique Florges. And then the other thing that they could touch from Kalos is, of course, Mega Revolution. Mega Revolution is still very prevalent in Pokemon Go, so it's not like it's completely dead. If we can't get Kalos, it would kind of be a cool throwback if we could meet Professor Sycamore at some point and they bestow upon us a way to Mega Evolve our Pokemon. I think this would be a huge win because many fan favorite Pokemon are Mega Evolutions. It would also be a good excuse to add some of the old Pokemon back into the game that all have Mega Evolutions so that we could get the entire catalogue of Mega Pokemon available. Maybe they have some kind of limitation where you can't terrestrialize a Pokemon if it's a Mega Pokemon. I think that would be pretty sensible. But then again, power creep and Pokemon and DLC, it all happens and you never know how crazy it's going to get. The thing I'm predicting for the DLC, as I say, maybe some kind of event with Kalos related elements, but I'm predicting just a new area of Paldea that we can go and explore that has brand new legendary Pokemon to catch, and you can go back and catch the old legendary Pokemon all again as usual. There's kind of been their gimmick the last couple of gens of like Ultra Sun and Moon, and with the Crown Tundra as well. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we get something rather similar to Crown Tundra. Just a short story experience based around a new, random legendary Pokemon that we don't know about, and then probably a focus on catching old legendary Pokemon and doing something new with the Terror Raid battles, which it sounds like they are improving a little bit in a recent patch, but we'll see about that. Overall, I would absolutely love it if we could go back to Kalos and revisit it in some way, or if the grayed out part of the map ended up being some kind of cool battle frontier for us to go around. But I think I'm being very hopeful when it comes to that. So yeah, I would presume this expansion pass will probably be a couple of smaller events, and then maybe those could maybe be dished out while we wait for the bigger DLC. But I imagine, yeah, that big grayed out landmass will be the main focus of the DLC, and there'll be some hopefully cool things there. But Game Freak in general tends to stick to its old ways, and I just think I'm going to be let down by it being a bunch of legendary Pokemon focused stuff, which I'm never a fan of. So yeah, that's what I think will be the Pokemon Presents. I don't think there'll be anything too far out of left field, but I would love to see it. I'm just really hoping to be blown away by this awesome expansion pass in my head where we get to revisit Kalos and go get all of our Mega Pokemon back, but I just have a feeling it's not going to happen. Anyway, thank you all for listening to my predictions, and I hope you all have a lovely day.
Thank you to all our patrons for supporting this channel and all the...
Patrons.
Oh, for God's sake!
I am Nisha Bot. Thank you, patrons.
As you can see, scrolling are our supporters.
Supporters from Nisha Bot.
And for our VIPs, we have a special readout.
Yes, continuing with top films of all time, as brought to you by VIPs of this channel. So the 22nd movie on our list is Silence of the Jason Ursenbach.
At number 23, we have City of Hanan DOA Argove.
At 24, Saving Private Aram Sabatis.
At number 25, we have Into the Red Oak Shield Virus.
At number 26, Tyler Mason is beautiful.
Such a good film.
Tyler Mason is so beautiful in it.
At number 27, we have the Litigation - Santa Claus Mile.
It's a very long name for a very long mile. At number 28, Sev Wars.
At number 29, we have Terminator 2 Ryan Rider Day.
At number 30, Jeffrey Odell to the Future.
At number 31, we have Noah Bendon Away.
It sounds like a superhero exit.
It just reminds me of that scene in Bruce Almighty where he's like,
Hi-ho, Quicksilver, away! At number 32, The Jub Jub 366, Nist. Pianist.
Pianist. Oh, God's sake, another one word. At number 33, we have Jessica Hayes Co. or Psy Jessica Hayes. Neither of them work.
At number 34, we have CD Bad Sight, or Para-CD. There's a lot of one-word ones here, people.
No.
Bear with us.
Oh, God. Next one's Leon. At number 35, we have Eric Toledo Eon. Toledo.
Toledo.
I can't even say it.
Leo Pluridan, Charlie. At 36, the Thani Saeed Al-Ramaithi King.
Number 37, we have Red Headiator.
Sounds like Radiator. Number 38, Andy Roffel, History X.
At number 39, we have the Sloan Rockefeller. The Sloan Rockefeller Departed.
Or just Sloan Rockefeller Departed. It's like
My God, stop picking at my words!
At number 40, the usual Ryan Lutzelschwab.
At number 41, we have J Grid Prestige.
Ooh, the amazing J Grid. At number 42, Whip Nesta Ailman.
Different kind of film. Yeah, that was interesting, as always.
Some of them don't work.
They
but...
don't, because of obviously the one words that don't seem to work, and then ones that are the. You have to replace the, I think.
Well, every month we'll come to you with some different kind of thing, so look forward to the next ones.
Yeah, look forward to the next chaos.
Thank you, patrons.
Patreon.
Patrons. Patreon.
Beep, beep, boop, boop.